Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
WMAL. 6:07 on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here to our Thursday morning version. It's Larry O'Connor with Bethany Mandel of the Mom Wars Substack and podcast. Mom Wars, the Mom Wars. One more time, that's the Mom Wars.
I'll pay you. But not for every single mention.
I just want an extra helping of brisket at the Shabbat. 7:05, Amy Riccardi, who just won her seat on the Loudoun County School Board. 8:05, KT McFarland. 8:35, Congressman Brandon Gill. That would be Brandon Gill, one of our faves. Yesterday, the ladies of The View celebrated the socialist takeover of the Democrat Party. That's no other way to call it. That's exactly what happened. And Sunny Hostin provided some revealing analysis of what she believes Democrats need to continue doing. Cut 3 here is Sunny Hostin.
That is the roadmap for how Democrats become the opposition party. You meet energy with energy. When they go low, you go lower. I am sorry, but that is where we are now. We need that opposition. And I think we saw that last night.
So from a Virginia perspective, down here in the nation's capital, when you look at the results of the election, the thing that stands out is Jay Jones, the man who wanted Republicans to be murdered in cold blood and police officers to be shot dead so that they would change their positions on certain political issues. When you see him winning by 6 points as Attorney General, and you hear Sunny Hostin saying, how did she put it again, Sunny Hostin? Let's listen to that one more time.
That is the roadmap for how Democrats become the opposition party. You meet energy with energy. When they go low, you go lower. I am sorry, but that is where we are now. We need that opposition. And I think we saw that last night.
There you go. We saw that last night. So that's, from our perspective, that means we want more Jay Joneses, I suppose. This is who they are. At least they're not pretending anymore, Bethany.
Yep. When they tell you who they are, believe them.
Yeah. I worry that is the lesson that's being taken. I mean, there's 2 lessons for Democrats to take away yesterday. Jay Jones, anything is acceptable and celebrated as long as you win. Just win, baby. Number 1, and number 2, socialism that ain't so bad. Heck, we can come out of the closet now. We're all socialists. Which again, I prefer to fight them in a way where they're not deceiving us. You remember 10 years ago, I want to say. It was 2016. Bernie Sanders was rising in his primary fight against Hillary Clinton. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the chairwoman of the DNC. She was on with Chris Matthews on Hardball, and Chris Matthews asked what he probably thought was a softball question, but it ended up vexing Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He said, hey, you're the chairwoman of the DNC. What's the difference between being a Democrat and being a Democratic socialist? And she couldn't answer. And it's because there is no difference anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they should lean in. I think they should just go all out. I don't see how it goes wrong for them, and I support them 100%.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm joking, but it's sad and frustrating because I would like a sane opposition party. I would like the volume to go down, the temperature to go down, and they are determined and heck bent to keep the temperature in Arizona in July, it's not healthy. It's not normal.
It's where their energy comes from, and I guess they think that Republicans will back down or something and be intimidated by that, but I don't think that's really going to be the response. In fact, Donald Trump yesterday with his interview with Bret Baier actually had a response to Zohran Mamdani's fighting words that he said during his speech. We'll play that for you in a quick sec, but we'll give you another shot of what's going on in Virginia. As you remember that video that came out on Election Day, we talked about it yesterday, of Jay Jones seemingly, sort of kicking a little dog, literally just like extending his leg and his foot out to try to make contact with a little dog while standing at a polling place. Who does that? And it's now been, AI manipulated. And instead of just gently kicking the dog, he's actually full on, like he's trying to kick a 70-yard field goal of the dog. But the dog has been superimposed with the image of Jason Miyares, the Attorney General of Virginia. And so Jay Jones is kicking Jason Miyares up into the sky and over the houses in the next block. That was tweeted out by Louise Lucas, the president of the Senate in Richmond, the leader of the Democrats down there. They're celebrating violence. And again, everyone's like, well, Trump used to put out memes of wrestling matches with the CNN logo. Okay, yeah, you know what? The CNN logo is a lot different than the actual human being. And by the way, if your response is, we're just like Donald Trump, okay, go with that, but you've been telling me for the last 10 years that Donald Trump is literally Hitler.
Yeah.
So now your response is we can be literally Hitler too.
Yeah, I think also it's different because someone was publicly assassinated pretty recently.
Yeah, and then there's that.
Yeah.
So and then there's that.
It's just it's dangerous. These are dangerous times, and people are playing with fire. And, if this had been, God forbid, AOC executed on live television, we would be in a very different place right now.
Yeah.
And I don't get it. I don't get what their end game is.
Well, as I mentioned yesterday during an interview with Bret Baier, President Trump was asked about the rhetoric from Zohran Mamdani, which was very targeted toward Donald Trump in his victory speech. There was nothing congenial about it. It was, in fact, tripling down. It was more aggressive and more in your face and more confrontational than anything you heard on the campaign trail. Even Van Jones said, wow, this isn't the guy we saw during the campaign. Where'd this angry communist come from? Oh, he was always there, Van. Mm-hmm. We just didn't pretend he was otherwise like you did. Well, here's Donald Trump being asked about that.
I want to touch about New York City real quick. You're a New Yorker. You famously kind of had a fight with Ed Koch back in the 70s and 80s as he was a mayor. He obviously wasn't a democratic socialist, as you call the mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani a communist. But is there any part of you that looks at Mamdani and says, it is good for you politically to have a big foil there that you're going to talk about for the next 3 years?
I'm so torn because I would like to see the new mayor do well because I love New York. I really love New York. When I left New York for Washington, New York was doing really well, but there were some bad signs. The bad sign was a guy named de Blasio. So the signs of de Blasio, that was the beginning, and it was bad. This one, we're going to look. For 1,000 years, communism has not worked. Communism or the concept of communism has not worked. I tend to doubt it's going to work this time.
Did you see his victory speech?
It's literally never worked. Yeah, I thought it was a very angry speech, certainly angry toward me, and I think he should be very nice to me. I'm the one that sort of has to approve a lot of things coming to him, so he's off to a bad start.
At one point he says, turn the volume up.
So hear me, President Trump, when I say this. To get to any of us, you will have to get through all of us.
How do you respond to that? Does that affect anything you're going to do?
It's a very dangerous statement for him to make, actually. And, you talk about danger. I think it's a very dangerous statement for him to make. He has to be a little bit respectful of Washington, because if he's not, he doesn't have a chance of succeeding.
So, game on. Game on, Zohran Mamdani, and Trump is not wrong there. The president is correct that New York, for it to sustain its budget and do all the things that it does, it needs a lot of federal funding, and you have to have a good relationship. Let's not forget the old headline from the New York Post when Gerald Ford refused to bail out the bankrupt city of New York under Ed Koch's socialist light policies of the 70s. Ford to New York, dropped dead. Well, get ready for kind of the same sort of approach. I'm not saying you kowtow. I'm just saying you act like a politician and you do what's best for the people of your city, and that means you cooperate and work with the federal government when you're New York City.
Yeah, no, it's really that easy, especially when so much transportation funding is dependent upon Washington and their transportation infrastructure is crumbling.
Yep. And he wants to give it away for free.
Yeah.
Who pays for that?
Yep.
The taxpayers of Oklahoma will pay for that ultimately because it's all propped up by federal funding. You're right, Bethany. And he plays fast and loose with the money of people from other states, doesn't he?
Well, he plays fast and loose with everyone's money. Every other person's money he plays fast and loose with. He's a socialist. And so, this entitlement to other people's money is at the core of his entire political ideology. So it's really on brand.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
So let's not forget, cut 4 here, it's Mamdani during his acceptance speech, which, again, I want to remind you, if you're really a political aficionado and a historian, Mamdani's speech was much more effective in the original Russian from 1917, Bolshevik style. Take a listen, cut 4.
If there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. This is not only how we stop Trump, it's how we stop the next one.
All right. So, and again, this rhetoric, just so you know, when he says dismantle the, how did he put it? Listen, let me hear it again. Sorry, I lost the words.
If there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power.
Dismantle the conditions that allowed him to accumulate power. He's talking about dismantling capitalism. Okay, that's what
and also
he's
democracy.
Saying. Yes, that's right. How did Donald Trump accumulate power? Through his wealth and through winning elections.
Yes.
So we need to dismantle that. I say you hear it all the time from them. How did the Bernie Sanders? We're the richest country on the planet, and yet we don't provide free health care. How their solution is to actually attack the very mechanisms that made us the wealthiest country on the planet. They never stop there. How do you think we got to be the wealthiest country on the planet? And that's what he intends to do. Zohran Mamdani does, if he can, although he can't. That's the other thing. The mayor of New York doesn't have the power to dismantle the very conditions that allowed people to get wealthy in New York. But what's most chilling about that statement, Bethany, is the cheers from the crowd of people who, aren't even native New Yorkers, by the way.
Yeah.
That's another part of this story. I don't know if we discussed this. If you were you would have voted for Andrew Cuomo?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I hate him with every fiber of my being. And that's the reason why he lost, because everyone hates him with every fiber of their being, because Democrats cannot pick anyone inspiring to save their lives.
That's right.
And it is saving their lives, and they can't do it.
So here's the stat of the election. If you voted for Mamdani, let me ask the question this way. The question is, how long have you lived in New York City? So if you answer, I was born in New York City, you voted 50-38 Cuomo over Mamdani. I've lived here 10 plus years, but I wasn't born here. You voted for Mamdani 54-41. You've lived here 5 to 10 years. You voted for Mamdani 79-18. You lived in New York less than 5 years, 85-14%. So by a vast majority, if you lived in New York for 10 years or fewer years, you voted for Mamdani. In other words, Cuomo needed longtime New Yorkers to vote for him if he was going to win the election. And as governor during the pandemic, he drove away those New Yorkers. Those New Yorkers now live in Florida. Those New Yorkers don't live in New York City anymore. And by the way, he said of right-to-life New Yorkers, after he signed the most drastic, enthusiastic abortion laws that allowed for abortion legally during labor, he said that pro-lifers who opposed that are extremists and they're not welcome in New York. And guess what? They paid attention and they left New York too. All the voters that Andrew Cuomo needed to win that election, he personally drove away, Bethany.
Yep, that's right. Or killed them. Let's
Yeah, or killed them in their nursing homes.
Yes. The old people did vote for Cuomo much more, and it would have been nice for there to be more old people in New York, but here we are.
Donald Trump is also commenting on Mamdani's promise to block ICE in New York.
Mr. President, your beloved New York City Your beloved New York City may well be led by a communist soon, Zoran Mamdani, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Zoran Mamdani?
Well, then we'll have to arrest him. Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully.
We're going to need to arrest him. That was, by the way, the framing of the question by Benny Johnson is on brand there. Certainly in that exchange. That was after the primary. So, and he promised in his victory speech to protect all of the immigrants. And, of course, they don't distinguish between illegal immigrants, illegal immigrants, criminal illegal immigrants. So now we're going to have that showdown too. Do you buy into the idea that this Mamdani now becomes a perfect foil and opponent for Donald Trump, and it actually boosts the brand?
I'm nervous to hope that, because I always think back to 2016 Democrats when they saw Donald Trump and they rubbed their hands together like Mr. Burns on The Simpsons, and then and then it blew up in their faces.
Excellent.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's been people they're on the right who are looking at, for example, the Maine Senate race, and there's Graham Plattner, who's a nut job and terrible and had a Nazi tattoo on his chest.
Literally.
And he's terrible. And then there's Janet Mills, this like old, nice lady who is uninspiring in every way, which is the only thing that mainstream Democrats seem to have in their back pocket, which is why they get so excited by people like Graham Plattner. And so there's people who are like, oh, man, we wish that all that oppo on Graham Plattner had come out after the primary so that we could sink him in the general. And I'm like, no. That's the bad strategy, because it's not sinking him and it might not sink him. And then you've got a Nazi potentially winning a Senate seat in Maine. Yeah. Not a good idea.
Quite a state of affairs in this country, but certainly makes things interesting for those of us who comment on politics on a daily basis. 624. Coming up yesterday in the Supreme Court, they had an emergency hearing over Trump's tariffs. We'll share some of the audio with you and some of the analysis and maybe a guess or two about how the justices may rule. Coming up at 6:30.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. WMAL. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:36 now as our morning charges ahead on this 6th day of November. I had to check the calendar there. I couldn't remember if it was the 5th or the 6th because the days are flying by. Coming up at 7 o'clock, we're going to speak with Amy Riccardi, who just won a school board seat in Loudoun County, Deep Blue Sterling District there. The one giant winner yesterday for Common Sense. Tuesday, sorry, feels like yesterday. 8:05 KT McFarland, and then 8:35 Congressman Brandon Gill. Clearly, Bethany Mandel, I don't know what day it is, so I need your help.
It's Thursday. That's how you know I'm here.
I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
I'm very glad you're here. I feel like I've woken up from a strange NyQuil-induced dream, and a communist is now the mayor of New York City. It was weird. I need to tap my ruby slippers and say there's no place like home. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard arguments in an emergency hearing over President Trump's use of tariffs around the world. Quick thumbnail here. The Constitution gives tariff power to the legislative branch. However, there is a statute on the books. Congress passed a law ceding much of that power, if not all of the tariff power, levying power, to the executive branch. And therein lies the argument. The Trump administration is being sued over the tariffs that they have imposed on foreign nations. They say that the statute allows them to do that, and that's where the Supreme Court comes in. Let's start with the ridiculous. Ketanji Brown Jackson, who, once again, she speaks more than anyone else on the bench. She's in her third year now. And she's proving Amy Coney Barrett right with regard to her knowledge of the Constitution, of law, and just basics. Here, take a listen, cut 7.
Did any president under TWIA use that language to impose tariffs?
Well, yes, President Nixon's 1971 tariff.
Not a tariff. That wasn't a tariff. It was a licensing agreement during wartime. It was a specific thing. A tariff I'm talking about.
I'm referring to President Nixon's 1971 tariff.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. Yes, I thought you meant Lincoln.
Not only that, but then it was upheld by the Court of Appeals with exclusive jurisdiction under this very phrase.
Can I back you up just a second? I'm sorry. You're talking so quickly.
Sorry.
That doesn't instill a lot of confidence, Bethany, does it?
I mean, she doesn't instill a lot of confidence in general. I'm not the brightest crayon in the box, okay? Like, how much do I understand all of this tariff stuff? I told you before the segment started, like, not a lot. But I think that a Supreme Court justice should be smarter than Bethany Mandel.
Yeah.
I do.
That's
I think
a low bar.
It's a low bar, and you should pass it. And maybe that's something, when we're choosing the next Supreme Court justices, that's a question on the box. Are you smarter than Bethany Mandel? No. Okay, it's a pass.
We all should have seen it coming when she couldn't tell you what a woman is. Here's a little more of an intelligent exchange where Justice Brett Kavanaugh, I believe, sort of drills down to the crux of this whole issues, and that has to do with what this statute allows a president to do with regard to tariffs and the nonsense argument that those who are suing, the plaintiffs here, are trying to make. Which basically is, the president can stop trade with the country, or the president can impose quotas on the goods that are coming in from a country, but the president can't impose even a 1% tariff, which makes no sense. Here, take a listen.
Precisely because it doesn't have the effect of raising revenue.
Mr. Katyal referred to common sense several times, and I want to pick up on Justice Barrett's question, because your interpretation of the statute, as she pointed out, would allow the president to shut down all trade with every other country in the world, or to impose some significant quota on imports from every other country in the world, but would not allow a 1% tariff. And that leaves, in the government's words in its brief, an odd donut hole in the statute. Why would a rational Congress say, yeah, we're going to give the president the power to shut down trade? I mean, think about the effects. But you're admitting that power's in there.
Yeah.
But can't do a 1% tariff. That doesn't seem, but I want to get your answer, to have a lot of common sense behind it.
I think it absolutely does, because it's a fundamentally different power. It's not a donut hole. It's a different kind of pastry. And on that power,
that's a good one. On that power, though, and you've said this many times, and Mr. Katyal too, and look, I get this, obviously, but the court has repeatedly said a tariff on foreign imports is an exercise of the commerce power, not of the taxation power. And I'm repeating some, but John Marshall said that, and Joseph Story, and Chief Justice Hughes in the 1933 case. And we've said that quite a bit of time, which seems to at least undermine a bit your point that it's an entirely different power, because if it is foreign commerce power, it's the same power that Justice Barrett was talking about of just embargoing trade with the entire world, which you admit is in this statute.
Well, there are a couple of points in there, and I'll try to get to all of them. But, I mean, I think all of us agree that context is what matters here, and that you certainly could use the word regulate to talk about a tariffing power, like you could use it to talk about a taxing power. I mean, we impose taxes for regulatory purposes as well. But the federal government hasn't identified a single other federal statute that uses the term regulate to authorize tariffs or taxes. That is just a different kind of power.
All right. So really good exchange there. And my favorite part is when Justice Kavanaugh said, listen, I understand. I get it, obviously. And he probably looked over at Ketanji Brown Jackson and gave her a little side eye over there. But there's another part of this argument that was made in the Supreme Court yesterday with regard to tariffs and the executive branch and the commander-in-chief's ability to impose tariffs and utilize tariffs and wield tariffs, and that has to do with the executive branch's responsibility when it comes to national security and foreign policy. We'll get into that part of the argument in a moment. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, made that point very well on CNBC. You'll hear that, and then we'll discuss, where this is going to end up. It's kind of a high-minded constitutional conversation on your favorite morning radio program. It's 6:43.
Tomorrow on the Chris Plante Show, Democrats divided over cutting deal to end a shutdown. They don't want to cut a deal and they don't want to end the shutdown. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
Back to the arguments yesterday. We just played a lengthy exchange with Justice Brett Kavanaugh talking about the executive branch's ability here, the commerce powers of the executive branch versus the legislative branch on tariffs. And then there's the national security component, because if you look at how the tariffs have been employed since this late spring, when the president actually put them in place or threatened to put them in place, he's been able to come back with trade deals and also been able to utilize tariffs as a bit of a stick to the carrot of trade to get other countries to maneuver into peace deals and such. That's how a lot of the Middle East developments were made, or the EU's participation in the Middle East negotiations. It is very much a national security component. Here's Scott Bessent yesterday making that point, cut 9.
I'm actually going to go and sit hopefully in the front row and listen, have a ringside seat. And Jesse, this is a matter of national security. If President Trump had not had the IEEPA, which is an emergency tariff authority, back in the spring, he put IEEPA tariffs on China. And last week in in Korea, the Chinese agreed to start working to bring down the precursors for fentanyl. If fentanyl is not a national emergency, what is? China, on October 8th, threatened to curtail rare earths to the entire world. President Trump threatened to put on 100% tariffs and protected our national security using the IEEPA power. And then finally, these big trade deficits we've had for years. In economics, there's something called a tipping point, and we were at the tipping point. Fortunately, President Trump came in, he put on the tariffs, he is rebalancing global trade in favor of the U.S., and he has prevented an economic crisis.
And that helps us for national security as well in terms of our manufacturing opportunities and not being reliant on foreign countries. It's all tied together. So we'll ask Katie McFarland about the national security component coming up at 8:05. But I think the arguments went in a way, Bethany, from what I saw, that it looks like the president will prevail here once again. But we shall see. Some of the questions, though, were disconcerting with regard to, as you put it, the knowledge base that the Supreme Court justice has had on these sort of things.
And this is something that I think, the knowledge base of folks who don't understand, I think the brilliance of how President Trump operates. He uses sort of business conversations and financial questions as a point of leverage when he's negotiating everything in foreign policy. And that's what happens when you have a businessman become president. He is an outside-the-box thinker, and he understands how to negotiate in a business arrangement. But I think that you said this off air. I don't think that you said this on air. But one interesting thing that I wasn't thinking about in this whole tariff conversation is that the money that we're making off these tariffs is what's keeping whatever remains of the federal government afloat right now during the shutdown.
That's right.
That's some national security there, too.
It's 6:54.
Making sense of your world.
I don't know where to begin.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Thanks for taking my call.
Making sense of the news.